You are now tuned in to Chris Barnes, Raw and Uncut. Let's get into it.
Now comes defendant Charles Liggins, by and through his attorneys Cynthia Grigetti and Gregory Mitchell, and hereby moves this honorable court, pursuant to federal rules of criminal procedure 29 and 33, to enter judgments of acquittal as to counts 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7, or in the alternative, for entry of an order granting Mr. Liggins a new trial as to each of those counts. Charles Liggins was charged in the superseding indictment as follows: committing a violent crime in aid of racketeering, namely the murder of Carlton Weekly, in violation of Title 18 USC 1959A1, and 2, count 1, using a firearm in relation to a crime of violence resulting in the death of Carlton Weekly in violation of Title 18 USC 924J, and 2, count 2, conspiracy to commit a crime of violence in aid of racketeering, namely the murder of Carlton Weekly, in violation of Title 18 USC 1959A5, count 3, committing a violent crime in aid of racketeering, namely the assault with a dangerous weapon of Davon Brinson, in violation of Title 18 USC 195A3, and 2, count 4, using a firearm in relation to a crime of violence, namely the assault with a dangerous weapon of Davon Brinson, in violation of Title 18 USC 924 C1A, and 2, count 5, committing a violent crime in aid of racketeering, namely the assault with a dangerous weapon of Cache Williams, in violation of Title 18 USC 1959A3, and 2, count 6, and using a firearm in relation to a crime of violence, namely the assault with a dangerous weapon of Cache Williams, in violation of Title 18 USC 924 C1A, and count 7. Jury selection began on October 10, 2023. On January 17, 2024, the jury returned a verdict finding Mr. Liggins guilty of counts 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7, and not guilty of counts 4 and 5. Prior to trial, counsel for Mr. Liggins filed numerous pretrial motions. At trial, Mr. Liggins' counsel made numerous motions, opposed numerous government motions, made numerous objections to evidence offered by the government, challenged rulings of the court, submitted and objected to the jury instruction, and otherwise advocated for Mr. Liggins. Moreover, at the beginning of the trial, the court ruled that objections and arguments made by co-defendants will also be considered as made on Mr. Liggins' behalf unless he opted out. All of these motions and objections were fully argued by the parties, sometimes on multiple occasions, and the court ruled on each of these objections, motions, and arguments. Consequently, counsel cannot itemize each and every ruling or error of the court. By these post-trial motions, Mr. Liggins does not waive any errors that were preserved by written motions, by objection during trial, or otherwise, or that may be found after a more thorough review of the complete transcripts of the proceedings and the records. These post-trial motions will focus on those areas of disputes that alone or in combination entitle Mr. Liggins to a judgment of acquittal, or in the alternative, a new trial. Rule 29 requires the entry of judgment of acquittal, where after viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the United States, the trial court finds that no reasonable tier of fact could have found the essential element of crime beyond a reasonable doubt. However, this standard does not require the defendants to demonstrate that no evidence at all supports the convictions, but rather that the evidence cannot support a finding of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The no evidence standard was rejected in Jackson, where the Supreme Court held that while a mere mockrium of evidence may satisfy a no evidence standard, it cannot by itself rationally support a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. Furthermore, circumstantial evidence can only be used to support reasonable inference, not speculation or conjecture. Based on the evidence and theory presented by the government at trial, each of the counts of conviction against Charles Liggins required the government to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that on August 4th, 2020, Charles Liggins was on Oak Street shooting a firearm with others that resulted in the murder of Carlton Weekly and the assault with a dangerous weapon of Cache Williams. In addition to his presence at the involvement in the shooting, the government was required to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that O Block was an enterprise engaged in racketeering activities and that defendant Liggins' alleged actions on Oak Street were for the purpose of maintaining and increasing his position in the alleged O Block enterprise. The government's evidence at the trial failed to prove that Liggins was a participant in the shooting on Oak Street on August 4th, 2020, that resulted in the Carlton Weekly's murder and injury to Cache Williams. That evidence, even when viewed in the light most favorable to the government, was so deficient that no reasonable tier of fact could have found beyond a reasonable doubt that Charles Liggins was a participant in the shooting on Oak Street, August 4th, 2020. No one who was present on Oak Street at the time of the shooting testified that Charles Liggins was present at the location, much less involved in the shooting. Video footage of the Oak Street shooting was introduced. However, no witness identified Charles Liggins in that video footage. No forensic or physical evidence put Charles Liggins on Oak Street at the time of the shooting. In fact, the government's forensic cell site analysts established that during the time of the murder, Charles Liggins' phone was not on Oak Street, but was in fact at Parkway Gardens. There was no evidence that Charles Liggins made any statements admitting to involvement in the shooting. No witness testified to overhearing any conversations between Charles Liggins and any of the alleged co-conspirators discussing the murder. Although the government claimed that the defendant at Parkway Gardens were notified that Carlton Weekly was on Oak Street by a phone call allegedly made by the defendant Ralph Turpin, there was no proof of any such phone call to any of the defendants, much less Charles Liggins. Thus, even the initial incident that allegedly precipitated the shooting was not proved. Instead, the government's claim that Charles Liggins was involved in the shooting on Oak Street is based solely on identification made by four witnesses: David Sloan, Martell Wiley, Tiffany Huff, and Terrence Garrett. None of those four witnesses was on Oak Street at the time of the murder. None of those four witnesses identified Charles Liggins in the video footage of the shooting on Oak Street. Instead, the witnesses purported to identify Charles Liggins going up and down a stairwell at Parkway Gardens before and after the time of the murder from Parkway Gardens security video. However, none of the four witnesses were in the stairwell at the time the security video was recorded, so none of the four witnesses had any personal knowledge of who actually was going up and down the stairs at the time. Instead, the witnesses were directed to look at poor quality security video of persons walking or running in unlit stairwells with dark shadows and distorting backlighting. There were no clear full face, well-lit views of the persons these witnesses identified as Charles Liggins. Some were twisted dark side views of persons without clear, identifiable or unique facial details. Others were of persons seen only from the back. By itself, the poor quality and limited perspective of these videos, which the witnesses viewed alone, establishes that their identification testimony is insufficient to support Charles Liggins' conviction. Additionally, none of the four witnesses has sufficient familiarity with Charles Liggins' appearance in August of 2020 to make an identification sufficient to support these convictions. David Sloan initially claimed to have lived at Parkway Gardens from 2011 to 2018 and to have hung around there until 2021. It was eventually established that starting in 2015, Sloan was living primarily in North Dakota, either with his family or in jail. And it was undisputed that Sloan was in jail from May 2020 through March 2021, after repeatedly failing to name Charles Liggins as a member or leader of O-Block on direct examination. The government simply fed Sloan Mr. Liggins' name. However, Sloan immediately clarified that he never had any personal relationship with Charles Liggins. On cross-examination, Sloan went even farther, admitting that in fact he had never personally met or spoke to Charles Liggins. Based on the evidence presented, Sloan simply had no bias of knowledge from which to make a physical identification of Charles Liggins as of August 4th, 2020. Adding to Sloan's lack of knowledge regarding Charles Liggins' appearance at the time, Sloan was a paid informant who received over $20,000, was still on the government's payroll, received immunity for his testimony, was hoping that his testimony will help him obtain a favorable deposition in a pending state gun case, and falsely reported to the FBI at the beginning of the trial that the defendants had recently murdered his brother.
Me go. I'm back. Y'all know what it is. Dumbass, stupid ass. Let's go. Ain't the type to hang with new niggas. Do this shit from day one, niggas. My shorty quick to pull them triggers. Unload on the goofy for nigga. Big me go, she pop her shit. Better get your bitch before she get hit. Now I got his goofy ass over pissed. Only thing I did is add it to the list. Ain't the type to hang with new niggas. Do this shit from day one, niggas. My shorty quick to pull them triggers. Unload on the goofy for nigga. Big me go, she pop her shit. Better get your bitch before she get hit. Now I got his goofy ass over pissed. Only thing I did is add it to the list. That's his bitch, yeah, I hit her, add her ass on to the list. Guess he went through her phone, now his goof ass over pissed. Better take it out with his bitch, better not come away with that shit. I'm overloaded PTSD so bad, not showing him blowing this bitch. Pocket stay fed, I'm a skinny guy when I walk a wild in this bitch. We ain't clicked up with shit, these niggas a snake cured for a brick. Better watch the rounds in this bitch, be the one that say look, you get your hit. I been popping my big shit, I'm Big Migo, you done weird bitch. I'ma go viral with this dance, get groovy, Drake all in my hands. I know you like me step, but dance overdo it when I catch your man. I'ma go viral with this dance, get groovy, Drake all in my hands. I know you like me step, but dance overdo it when I catch your man.